This second webinar in our Agrivoltaics webinar series with the University of Minnesota Extension. I'm Sabrina Florentino, the Alternative Livestock Systems Extension Educator, and with me I have a number of colleagues as well as sheep producer experts who are here to share their experiences with agrivoltaics. We have Dr. Travis Huffman, who is the sheep and goat specialist for NDSU as well as the University of Minnesota. And we have Dr. Brad Hines, who is a dairy management extension specialist with the University of Minnesota Extension. And then we have our three sheep producer panelists, who I will introduce in more detail here. But tonight we are pleased to have three different sheep producers with us, each coming from a little different perspective in the agrivoltaics world. But we have Joni Noner from MNL, and we have Olivia Halber and Evan Gunthorpe. So Jody brings a rich heritage of agricultural expertise as a fifth-generation sheep farmer with extensive experience raising frame Suffolks, club lambs, and commercial wool sheep. For the past 2 years, Jody has served as a key team member in the grazing division at MNL, and this is an innovative operation managing 1,500 hair sheep for solar grazing and restoration projects. In her current role, she serves as the primary liaison between MNL and solar companies across the U.S. Jody's responsibilities extend to developing and maintaining strategic relationships with local sheep farmers throughout the country, where she facilitates subcontracting opportunities as well for grazing services. Take it away. So,
hi, as Sabrina said, I'm the grazing program coordinator for Minnesota Native Landscapes, MNL. We're an ecological restoration company that uses sheep to maintain solar vegetation on solar farms throughout the United States, mainly in Minnesota, but we were branching out to other states. We currently are working with 10 different grazing 10 different power companies on solar fields this year with 10 different collaborators throughout the United States. I did scroll through the list of people on right now, and I found at least 3 of the collaborators that I work with watching this right now. MNL currently has 1,500 hair ewes with lambing. That's could be up to 2,500 depending on how lambing goes. Sorry. We've been grazing solar since 2017, and we've grazed roughly 12,000 acres since 2017 with an average of 2,500 acres a year. MNL as a company have quite a bit of different divisions that we have that work with not only solar, but all restoration. We've got a native seed and plant department. We provide native seed mixes for not only solar fields or farms going in. We work with large projects, small projects. We do backyard prairies all the way up to 20,000 acre native prairie installations. The construction department for MNL is in ecological restoration services for construction sites, shorelines, wetlands, and also seeding of solar farms. The vegetation management is a division of MNL that the grazing department works closely with, that we do full wrap vegetation services on both solar farms, government land, and private land, where we use, if sheep aren't appropriate, we use mowers and trimming, all of that stuff. We've got our own fire department that does control burns throughout the entire Midwest, and we do government projects as well. And then we also have a professional services department that we just started not that long ago, that one of the main things that we've started is working with solar developers to build solar sites with sheep grazing in mind. We give them recommendations on fencing, panel heights, cabling. We always encourage like wells to be put on site. We work really closely, and then we also help them develop local contacts for grazing in the future, not only just with us, but with their local local sheep producers if we're not in the area. I guess that's really all I have right now. My contact information is there if anybody is interested in solar grazing. The main thing with us is that we are looking for people, sheep producers throughout the United States that are in the right locations with the right amount of sheep. I work closely with producers all around the US to get them on solar fields that aren't necessarily under my contract, but get them in touch with the right people.
Perfect. Thank you, Jody, for that introduction. And now we will move on to our next presenter and sheep producer, Olivia Halber. Olivia is a fourth generation sheep producer, and she farms on her husband's family farm in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. They recently leased a little over 30 acres of their farm for 5 megawatts of solar energy production under the condition that her family would still farm those acres by grazing the sheep. This past summer, Olivia began managing the vegetation under the solar panels through solar grazing with her Texel sheep. And after raising sheep mainly as a hobby for 30 years, she never dreamed this would be her career. So we are excited to hear more. Olivia, you can share a little bit more about your production.
You can see my screen?
We can, yes.
Perfect. Okay. So that was me a really long time ago with my first sheep. So I'm just going to scroll through some pictures here, and you can kind of see where I graze. My husband and I own a 275-acre farm. This solar site here is right on our farm. We started grazing this site in mid-July of last year, so I have not completed a full year. We were most worried about spring flush. I do have the sheep out there grazing now and have been for about a week and a half. And I don't think the spring flush is going to be a problem. I think they will get it all eaten down and we will not have to mow, which is our goal. So this picture is a good picture of the vegetation that is there that we planted specifically for our sheep. We chose this, and my husband actually planted it before they started construction. The site has woven wire. You'll see on the bottom of this photo that we installed directly onto the I-beams that are on the site. And that eliminates having to put up a lot of temporary fences. So the woven wire runs north to south on the site, except for where there's driveways. And then I run Electronet east to west to make my individual paddocks. This was the laydown area where they did construction, but just another picture, you can kind of see what the site looks like here. Right to the left is where I set up my corral for my sheep, so I can run animals through to sort them into different groups, because I do have moms and intact males together a lot of the grazing season, so I can sort them right there. I can do my FAMACHA scoring. I also weigh all my animals. I do NSIP, so I set up my scale out there also and weigh them. And we even ultrasound scanned them out on site last year with all battery power, which is ironic because there are no plugins out there for us to use to do it. So here are the sheep. You can see a lot of the shade that the panels provide. This one, it wasn't too hot of a day. They're not all under there at this point. There are some pictures later where you'll be able to see that. A lot of people ask what we planted since we chose to plant, or we were able to plant what we wanted to in our own field. So this is what was planted before construction started. And this was what a grazing planner that we worked with through the NRCS had come up with. There's a lot of great stuff out there. There's a lot of alfalfa, maybe a little heavy in alfalfa, but I'm hoping more grass comes up here later this spring. I did add chicory and plantain for medicinal benefits. The chicory, we may regret. It does get kind of tall, but the sheep really, really love it. And they knock down the stuff that got kind of stocky. But I think if we stay on top of it better, and because we're out there grazing earlier than last year, I'm hoping that won't be a problem, but that may be something that might not be the greatest thing to plant because of its height, and it can be invasive. This is the solar site layout. And the red lines that run north to south are where our water are. We have the water line buried from my other sheep pasture all the way through our field and goes into the solar site. It's buried under every driveway. So people can come in and maintain things. I can drive right to with an ATV. We had to mow the water lines out of the way, but then the water line runs above ground when it's right next to the panels and my woven wire fencing. The yellow lines in here are where the woven wire is installed on the I-beams. So I can make, oh boy, I think it's about 27-ish 1 acre, I should say 27 one-ish acre, about 1 acre paddocks out here. So I management intensively graze these and move them out every other day. So they're out there and they move about every other day, depending on what time of year it is and how the growth is. So we hopefully come back around within no more than 45 days for parasites. Here's another picture. I love it when the sun is coming up and going down, and you can see the sun effect with the solar panels and the sheep. Here you can see a lot of the infrastructure that the sheep are in and amongst on the solar sites. The sheep are nosier with it than I thought. We also have raised dairy cattle and milk cows over the years, and they were nosier than I thought they were going to be compared to cows. So, but anything they keep their backs on, they will. They love the turning mechanisms. Even they will chew on some wires that are hanging there. So it is something to be aware of, that they do get a little curious and will use things for how they would like to. Here's other infrastructure on the site here. This is where all the equipment is. One side is the north side, one side is the south side. The sheep do graze right up against it. There's a lot of copper up there exposed, more than what we thought. We're finding more and more, and that is something to be aware of on solar sites. They can chew on the metal or gnaw on it and the copper, and will get copper into their system. And copper is toxic to sheep. Some breeds are more sensitive than others to copper, especially British breeds. Here is a combiner box that there's numerous ones all over the site, and you can see where all the wires are strung up here. The top table, which is enclosed in a black, I don't remember what it's called, a piece of black covering that is covering the copper wire that holds all these up. It wasn't supposed to be copper, but the company installing it decided to use copper, and hard but they did cover it up. They actually ended up raising it all up about a foot on the whole site after the sheep were out there, because the wires and everything were just too low, which I had told the people building it, but they didn't listen until they saw what happened with the sheep when it was too low. So if you see something on a site that you question it, and remind the people you're talking to that they probably don't raise sheep, and you probably know more about it than they do. stick up for yourself. Here is some fencing. We had a really low area here, and we had to reinforce our woven wire with some cattle panel. This is a close-up of my fencing and how it's attached to the I-beams. We got permission to put self-drilling screws in to hold the fence up, and not void any warranties. My my woven wire does not have any hot wires on it at all. I take my temporary fencing, my electronet is energized with solar fencers. And then on the perimeter, the people that installed the fence didn't have it that low, that close to the ground in a lot of areas. And we do have coyote pressure on our farm. So we did have them install barbed wire on the bottom to hopefully deter coyotes from entering. So if they do dig, the barbs will hopefully keep them out. This is just a list of things you maybe don't think of, or maybe do think of, some of them that you need when you are solar grazing. You don't just leave the site and not be responsible for the vegetation that your sheep didn't eat. So not only do you need a lot of sheep, you're going to need something like a mower, and depending what size the site is, a tractor, maybe a flail mower, a weed whacker I use all the time to set up my electronet so the sheep get a decent shock if they think they're going to go outside of where they're supposed to be. I have not actually weed whacked on our site or mowed anything on it other than for my electronet. You're going to need temporary fencing, electronet. I recommend double spike. There's a lot of compaction on solar sites. I actually hammer in a lot of my double spikes in areas where there was a lot of traffic because the ground is so compacted. I did mention fencers already, water tanks. Handling system is super handy. But depending on the size of the site, you might want a catch system, a set of gates to collect your sheep in a few different areas of the site, because if you have a sick animal that you can't catch, it is very difficult and dangerous to run under solar panels and try to catch them. A herding dog, it would be helpful. Right now, my children help me, and they're not always here to help though. I access a lot of the site with a UTV, and we sometimes have to trailer the animals from our barn to the site, depending on how flush the alfalfa field is in between the area. So, and again, some people look at solar graze and are thinking lots of dollar signs and that they're going to make a lot of money feeding their sheep. But it costs a lot of money to raise sheep, and you need to be honest with solar companies that yeah, you're going to raise all these sheep, but half of the year you're going to have to be feeding them on stored feed, and you're probably not going to be lambing on the solar site, and that you are going to need all that infrastructure and a facility at your farm, and it does cost a lot of money. And insurance is another thing they require you to have. Here you can see real well woven wire on the right and the left of the solar site here, and where there is a driveway. And that is where my electronet is going through. I kind of make an eye with my electronet to make a paddock. So right where we're seeing the picture here, that technically would be a paddock on the right and the left, but there's no divider there. But as you look forward, you can see where there's a division, there's a paddock on the right. And there would have been one on the left. And that's one of my solar fencers. It's heavy, but it's got a lot more juice than my little smaller fencers. There's another picture of how I divide off the paddocks. Before I started grazing last July, the site was mowed once. And this is just a good picture of what it looks like when they mow. They left a lot of messes. And I might be a little extra sensitive to things because this is our farm and my husband's family's generations of blood, sweat, and tears. And it's a little frustrating to see them just leave like wasted hay, pasture stuff around. You can see behind the hay little pile there, the chicory that got really tall, but they didn't even weed whack that or mow that. So the sheep do a much better job at vegetation maintenance than the people who came to mow this. But also when they mowed it, a ton of vegetation rotted all the other pasture, the rest of the pasture that was there, and killed off a lot of good stuff. So that was really frustrating. And they left a ton of ruts. So mowing isn't the greatest thing on a solar site. If you have a really wet spring, it's not really ideal either. Here's my corral I mentioned. I have part of my Seidel corral out there. And I leave the other part in my barn. But this is what I have set up to catch the animals on site and divide them into different groups. And we had egg bag on the structure there to scan animals that day so they could see the ultrasound scan machine. But here's another corral. I needed one on the south end. The other one was on the north end. Here is the south end. I just set up some gates, my lambing panel gates, and could collect the groups there and sort out animals or catch somebody and check on things. I use this trick anywhere on my farm is to put grain when they go into a corral, and then they are very eager to go and follow you anywhere and get their reward of some corn. When you don't have a herding dog, that works great. The sheep are super happy on the solar site. They have shade all the time. Today they enjoyed the structure, the shade, not the shade, sorry. They enjoyed the solar panels blocking from the wind and the rain. It was much warmer standing next to them than in the open area on the solar site. So you can see here, these guys are all standing or laying down in the shade. This is a hotter day. Animals eat more when they're cooler, so that you're going to see better growth in your animals. Saves you money if they can grow great, just on vegetation versus feeding them stored hay and grain. These are just some stats on mine. Animals, my Texels did great. A lot of them were, I should say a lot of them, the average of my animals at 5 months were ready to go to slaughter already. My goal is 125 pounds. So that was awesome. My butcher just wasn't lined up that early. But my lambs then, I didn't even have to give grain to flush them or anything for breeding. They were already at their 75% weight that I wanted them as ewe lambs. So that was a huge saving for me too. And it's time saving that I have to feed them additional grain. This was a study done by the AgriSolar Clearinghouse and shows a temperature decrease, the wool surface and their skin temperature of sheep under solar panels. So you're looking at around 40 degrees cooler on the wool, and about 34 degrees cooler on their skin. So that's a lot more than I was expecting to see in a study. Here's where my sheep are using the solar panels for shelter on a misty, rainy day. And on a snowy day. They were out there for about 24 hours. We had a little bit of snow in November, and I wanted to see what they would do. And they didn't look totally mad. They looked all right. So this slide is kind of this goes for everybody, but I know there are a lot of solar developers that were going to join today too. And just a planning ahead for a dual purpose land and doing agrivoltaics. We on our farm, this is our land, as I mentioned, we have a solar lease of about 30 acres and still own our land, and we actually are still farming it. So we're just also generating power from it and working with obviously a lot of other people. This can be a big win for solar companies and the farmer. We still get farmland preservation tax credits on the land because we are still farming it. I convinced the people who change your tax status on your land not to convert it to commercial use, which saved the company like $11,000 just on the conversion fees. And then taxes on that land. Because I told them we're still farming it, and then I showed them pictures and just educate them, and they thought that was pretty neat. So, but if you want to do agrivoltaics really successfully, it needs to be planned out ahead of time and setting them up from the beginning to allow farmers to continue to farm their land the way they do. I think there's a lot more you can do with it than just grazing sheep. Some crops do better under the panels than they do in full sun, just like the animals benefit from the shade. Another example that, just to think outside the box, people are irrigating their crops. If they can grow them under solar panels, their land isn't going to dry out as much. They'd use less irrigation. So just things to think about. And one thing I just really want farmers to stick up for and solar developers to realize too is that our topsoil really needs where it is. That was something that I thought was really sad. On our site is a lot of topsoil is no longer where it was, and we can't make money and grow things without topsoil. So that's the end of my slide. Joe.
Wonderful. Thank you, Olivia, and thank you for sharing those beautiful images and giving us an idea of your operation. Now we will have Evan Gunthrop from Indiana. So while he's doing that, Evan, with his parents, Greg and Lee, is it Lee?
Yes, Lee.
Is the owner of Traditional Grazing Solutions, a company based in LaGrange, Indiana. And the company offers comprehensive vegetation management with mechanical mowing to supplement their focus on grazing. Currently, Traditional Grazing manages 900 acres of solar and a flock of about 900 ewes that are owned by the Gunthrops. At the home farm, they also raise pastured pigs and poultry and operate a USDA inspected processing plant. And with that, they are able to direct market to chefs, retailers, and individuals across the continental US. So lots going on. Take it away, Evan.
Yeah, so as mentioned, I am Evan Gunthorpe. Claim to fame, I guess, would be fifth generation pastured pig farmer. Not particularly applicable here, I guess. But I grew up running a brooder barn, actually. Raised pastured chickens on the farm as well. I took care of the brooding stage and then graduated out of that into running a processing plant, which is where I am now. I still have 9 employees on the floor tonight. So run 2 shifts at the processing plant, and I'll get to the solar grazing eventually. But we started solar grazing last year. I would love to call myself a solar grazer. However, I have a full-time man on site who is really the grazer of the crew. He does an absolutely excellent job. I'm there a couple days a week, and other than that, Travis really takes care of things. So I've done a lot of the back-end work on the financials and on the grazing plan and everything of that nature. But as mentioned, we have 900 acres of panels that we graze. In addition to that, we have a contract for 50 acres of fire breaks outside of the panels. The site that we graze is about an hour and a half from the farm. So I've got quite a commute a few days a week that I head over there. Other than that, one full-time guy that is managing the sheep. Depending on the time of year, we are anywhere from daily to 3-day moves. Last year, throughout the season, when we had the weaned ram flock in addition to the ewe flock on site, we had 3-day moves on each of them. As of right now, daily moves. We just started lambing on Saturday, so we are drift lambing. As mentioned, comprehensive vegetation management. So we are doing both we have the contract for vegetation management on the site. We have a contractual obligation to keep everything inside the fence below 24 inches and then 30 feet outside the fence below 8 inches at all times. We can do that with sheep or with mowers. We have an expectation to have sheep on the site, and we definitely do. The sheep work significantly better than the mowers, but we have a significant amount of time tied up in mowing as well. So our sheep model, I guess, we have our contract allows us onto site as of the 1st of March, and then we have to be back off site the 1st of December. They don't want sheep on site over winter, primarily just from public perception. Seeing sheep in a lake effect snow belt getting hammered with snow probably doesn't look the best. Works out all right for us. Being an hour and a half from farm, I don't want to be busting ice every single day and dealing with some of those winter storms that we do occasionally get. So I'm not too mad about it, even if we are leaving a huge forage resource out there over winter. We dual class all the ewes before they go on the truck. We leave just a few of my best ones for a little bit of refugia. The purpose in that is that the site that we are on is converted crop ground. So the parasite load should be very, very low. I want to keep it very, very low for as long as I possibly can and get my ewes cleaned up in the process. As mentioned, we have 830 ewes on site currently on 900 acres. So we're still very understocked. I expect that when the sheep go on the truck, that we will touch them twice before they come back to the farm. We will wean sometime in August. We will do our vaccines sometime in October, and then we'll do second round of vaccines once they get back off of the truck when they arrive back to the farm, and we'll put the rams back in. So dual class prior to going on to the truck, we just rent or we get a third party to do the trucking. It takes 2 semi-loads to get that many sheep over to the site. We drift lamb starting in May, so we are some of those crazy hippies that lamb in May. I've continually pushed our lambing season back each year over the past 4 years or so, and it seems like this year things are really working out. That May lambing hopefully will get us out of any of the crazy weather events that cause me issues, but more importantly, it's got us to the point that we definitely have excellent forage availability for the ewes. So we don't really supplement at all anymore. Don't even really feed anymore, but even to that extent, definitely want the ewes to be on best plan of nutrition possible when they're lactating. So we drift lamb in May, forage water and mineral, not feeding any grain, not feeding any protein supplements, even over winter. This winter, we got by only feeding 10 days of hay after we got through our stockpiled forage. We will wean the intact rams sometime in August. We will market all of my market rams sometime before we come back home. So we will hit those into an ethnic market just through the local sale barn sometime prior to Thanksgiving. Typically end up loading most of those up a couple weeks prior to Thanksgiving as we get a little bit of an increase in the markets then. So the only ram lambs that are born on site that get to come back to the main farm are the ones that are good enough looking to keep for breeders. And then once the ewes come back home, sometime there between Thanksgiving and the 1st of December, they will be on stockpiled forage and hay fields up until, I guess historically, they've been on stockpiled forage and hay fields to get through winter. Prior to this past winter, we typically fed probably 30 to 60 days of hay. As mentioned, this past winter, we got down to 10 days of hay. As long as I can get some things lined up with the neighbors to get some crop residue and cover crop availability, we shouldn't feed any hay this upcoming winter, which has been absolutely huge for us. The availability or our ability to manage the pigs differently starting in September and October to really put up some stockpile forage on our pastures to have available for the sheep over winter has been huge. To not have the sheep here during the growing season, opening up the opportunity to graze the pigs for a focus on forage over summer has also been just absolutely huge for the home operation. See if this goes to the next slide. There it goes. Okay, so on site we use entirely portable infrastructure. So we of course are on a solar site with panels and perimeter fence and everything, but we could set the sheep up anywhere that we want to. Could set them up in the middle of a crop field if we so desired. Entirely portable infrastructure using just 2 strands of polywire. 2 strands of polywire, we're using those strain right step-in posts, multi-wire posts. We have a mineral feeder and a skid. I'm not sure if you guys can see that. I think I had a couple of ram lambs standing on top of it there. A couple of reused IBC totes on wagons. That's what we're using for water trailers right now. We also do have some water lines on site, just some above ground that we're playing with, working through. As of right now, the water trailers seem to be convenient enough for what we're doing. And then we have a fence trailer that carries some extra posts and our reels and everything. So if I had a larger trailer, which hopefully I will have a big step deck or flatbed or something to go on our semi here soon, we could be onto a site, back off of the site in time of a day, 2 days, 2 trips by just rolling all of our trailers, all of our posts, everything onto the little site trailers that we use to get around, just rolling those onto a flatbed, and we would be out of there. The specifics of the equipment that I use are all listed off right there. Our main fence chargers are 12 joules. On some of these paddocks, we will have probably 2,000 to 2,500 feet of wire out, 2-strand wire. So, mile of polywire around a paddock, 12 joules is probably excessive for that, but I am of the opinion that it is far better for the sheep and significantly better for the shepherd if you shock them once and they never try that fence again. And so far, we've had very, very good luck with the 12 joule on site. I haven't got bit by that one. I've got bit by our bigger ones at the farm, and the Cyclops do a pretty good job. Little closer look of our fencing there. We are on a tilt site. I think those are ATI trackers. So we're looking down the rows. The rows run north to south in terms of the pylons, and they tilt throughout the day. A little bit more of our look at our infrastructure. You can see down there in the bottom left, that is one of our reels, and that is how we set up our corners on site. That is a 22 millimeter net post from Premier One. Those end up working well enough for corners. They're not perfect by any means, but those are a step-in post. They've got a little tread on the bottom. You can push them into really, really hard ground that you can't get anything else into, and they're stiff enough that you can hook a post onto them. They're not great. Ideally, we would pound a post into, be able to get a little bit more tension on, but then we have to carry around a post driver. So I'm a big fan of those posts. We run 2 wires on every single reel. You can see the conductor hook there. We use a little quick link, and we loop the wire through that quick link so that it pulls tension evenly between the 2 wires. My Explorer, I am of the opinion that these things are absolutely awful, terrible vehicles. So please, if you see any of them cheap, just send them to me. Just send me a link to where they're for sale. I have 4 of them, so I'm trying to take them off of everybody else's hands that that shouldn't have them because they're terrible. So please send those my way. One of our little trailers that we use for hauling posts and reels, and we have solar panels set up on those that are charging deep cycle batteries, so we can run our fence chargers off of those. We also have drills and impact wrenches and whatnot if we do have to put a post in the middle of a driveway. So we have those set up on an inverter to charge through those little trailers. Did not get a picture of my posts when they came in. All of the math that I had said on step-in posts said that we needed like a pallet and a half of step-in posts. So that's what I ordered, and it's been pretty close to correct. I did get a picture of all of the reels when they showed up, though. I never thought that I would be buying reels and step-in posts a pallet load at a time, but I think it was 2.5 pallets when everything showed up. There's a little picture of a scale of the site that we are on. 950 acres total, 50 of which is basically not grazable, just in the fire breaks. It is a divided site, so it's broke into 9 separate permanently fenced areas, probably 1.5 miles from one corner to the other. So we do get a little bit of running in between perimeter fenced areas. Time will tell how that works out and how extensive we have to get when we are running in between arrays. As of currently, we have only ran just our same 2 strands of polywire and been able to get them everywhere. We have a couple of road crossings across public roadways. In those cases, we'll use poly nets and get the entire flock locked down to one area, one side of the road, close the road, have 2 guys, park a truck on either side of them with flashers on so that nobody hits us, and then run the sheep across and then pull the vehicles back out of the way. That particular array here, I think, is 3/4 of a mile from one end to the other. So it's very, very difficult to catch sheep on site if we do need to doctor anything. So that is the main reason that we do that dual classing prior to them going on the site. I've got an expectation that we don't touch sheep during the grazing season, or that we don't have to touch sheep during the grazing season. We of course will. We have a responsibility to take good care of the sheep that are under our care. So we will doctor things on site, but so far we've had very, very minimal need to, and the sheep have done really, really well. There's a picture that I probably shouldn't share too much, because if you know anything about tilting solar sites, tilting solar arrays, you should know that they should never be pointed towards each other. So one of those wasn't tracking right that day, but nonetheless thought it was a cool picture. The stuff on the left is obviously grazed, or was actively being grazed. The stuff on the right had not yet been grazed. We raised dinky little hair sheep, and previously, I said that in full sincerity, have pretty heavy Katahdin base, so they're pretty leggy things. But these guys were 6 months old, so we're not setting the world on fire in terms of our growth rates by any means. 6 months old, and they were hitting 90 to 100 pounds live weights. So nothing crazy, nothing exceptional, but very, very solid lambs for being 100% grass fed. These guys went to the site in August. This picture was taken in October, so they were not on the site for their full grow out. As you can see, very, very heavy clover on site. The clover, I believe, was used primarily just as a carrier and something for quick green up. Huge native mix that was put on site. I believe that there were 70 some species on site in terms of a seed mix, and we have begun now in our second year on site, begun seeing lots of those natives coming in. I believe that the tallest thing that they seeded on site was little blue stem. So they did intentionally select a seed mix that's going to hopefully stay short for us. Being recovered cropland, there is, of course, still Canada thistle and ragweed and water hemp and mare's tail and all of the undesirables that we're responsible for taking care of. But so far, it's worked really, really well for us. I definitely didn't spoil our sheep at the main farm. They were on pastures that most people would probably just call weed patches prior to going to the site. So they are no stranger to eating Canada thistle, no stranger to ragweed and burdock and everything else. So on site with a lot better forages than what they have back home, they have done a very, very good job of selecting the exact forages that we want them to eat, eating the tall stuff and leaving more of what most people would consider the better, shorter, higher nutrition clovers and things of that nature left over. I don't get too wound up about the solar sites themselves. I'm vehemently pro solar grazing, but the solar site that we are on has just absolutely huge populations, both of the native species of plants that they have seeded on site, but then the raptor population, the bird population, the rodents, the little voles and moles and whatever all scurrying around, the rabbits. There have been plenty of fox on site, which fortunately so far haven't caused us any issues. Nonetheless, the wildlife on site has been very, very cool to see, surrounded by cornfields, growing up in an I state. The whole commute over there is through nothing but corn and soybean fields and not a whole lot of anything, not even bugs bouncing off the windshield. So being on site with lots of birds and bugs and everything else is very, very cool.
Perfect. Thank you, Evan, again for those wonderful pictures and giving us all a bit better understanding of where each of you guys are coming from. So if we could have Jody and Olivia also turn their cameras on now, and we will sort of go through a list of questions, and those of you who are watching, please add yours as well in the chat. But I'm wondering if each of you could just touch on a bit more of like what you went through when you were trying to decide if this was something you wanted to do. So I know you're each coming from a different angle, but for example, Evan, what you thought about when you were going to say yes or no to this contract, or Olivia to the people trying to build on your land, and of course, Jody, if you could maybe share some more about the history of MNL and what all went into thinking about bringing sheep and solar together. Whoever wants to start can start.
Yeah, so we're relatively recent into sheep. Historically, grandpa and great grandpa before him have run very, very diversified agricultural operations, from stocker cattle and egg layers and every crop under the sun, and haylage and silage and dry hay and everything imaginable. That has really been thinned down over the years. We added sheep in 2021 after getting rid of the pastured chicken operation, after no longer producing chickens, and the solar grazing really looked like an obvious opportunity from the get-go. And there are an awful lot of operations that look at the solar grazing solely in terms of the vegetation management fee. And I think that there probably is a good business model just to pursue those fees. But I think that you're really selling yourself short, and you're no longer, in my opinion, an agricultural operation if you are not producing an agricultural product. So we still set out to produce a good land for the ethnic market. We expect to have a profitable sheep enterprise. We expect to have a profitable vegetation management company. And then we also expect to do something viable with the land at home that has become open because of the sheep. So solely from a vegetation management standpoint, I don't know that the sheep grazing under solar is something that I am any too excited about. It's very, very cool to see dumb sheep instead of mechanical mowers, but the opportunity to have that land, and very, very good land in our case, to run sheep on through the growing season, and the opportunities that it opens us at home is just absolutely huge.
Yeah, so for my perspective, for MNL, we started grazing, like I said, in 2017. It was a little bit before my time with them. but I know the owner of M&L has always wanted to do everything he can for a ecological restoration aspect of it. So it doesn't always make sense to maintain a renewable energy using fossil fuels. I know that was the main point of that. And then as I came in as a sheep producer, a lifelong sheep producer, I know how hard it is to make money raising sheep. So honestly, the best part of my job is to pay sheep producers to feed their own sheep with their local solar farms. Like these solar farms are going to go in whether we really want them or not in our communities. So we might as well use the land to grow a healthy grass-fed product and also pay sheep producers and make it a little easier for them to make a little money on their farms, diversify their income.
We were approached by a company to build the solar site on our farm because we raise sheep. They had seen an article in a newspaper that I was in about grazing sheep. So that's how we were pursued. And they wanted to put one in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, where we live. And that is how it started here. It was for us. I always like to say you don't want all your milk in one bucket because that's what we had here. And that wasn't good diversification. So we have tried to diversify our farm so we don't take a hit when the only thing we raise is not at a good price. Never dreamed of doing this. Never would have thought my 4-H project would turn into this sheep project on steroids. I don't use steroids. I just like to use that reiteration that this is my 4-H project on steroids. Never dreamed it would be here, but that's what we're doing. And does it answer the question, Sabrina? What else you asked?
Yeah, I think, yeah, just that question of what would make you say yes to, yeah, putting up panels on your site. But I think that is a good explanation of how they contacted you, and diversification is important anywhere, and especially in agriculture. Yeah, anything else to add on that, Olivia? Otherwise, all right. I know a couple of you mentioned lambing on site, so I think it'd be interesting to discuss what that looks like a little bit more. I think we've covered fencing and water pretty well with some pictures, but yeah, what does lambing look like? And Olivia shared her handling facilities pictures, but if Evan or Jody wants to include what that looks like on your sites as well. So lambing and handling facilities.
Yeah, so we lamb on site. This is our first year lambing on site. We have historically always pasture lambed and always drift lambed. So it's not a particularly different process on the solar site than what it is at home. The difference, of course, being that the acreage is significantly larger on the site. The site is still relatively fresh seeding, old crop ground. I'm sure that it probably had a century that it was getting plowed every single year. So the productivity on site's nowhere near what it is at home. So the paddock sizes have to be significantly larger on site than what the sheep were historically used to here. 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other, as to whether that is better or worse. The ewes so far have been doing a very, very good job of keeping with their lambs. The problem is that when they don't, they are now 600 feet away rather than being 40 feet away on the paddock sizes that we were running last year here at home. So far, it's worked really well. We had last year, we have a Marweld handling system, had a spot outside of the array fence. Particular reason for that is that anytime that we are inside the arrays, we have to be in long sleeves, long pants, full FR 8 cal gear, hard hats, high vis, safety glasses, whole gambit of the safety gear, along with a full safety training session for anybody that have there. Last year only had Travis on site, Travis and me. Dad on occasion helped catch up on some of the mowing, but our working days typically will run 5 or 6 guys. So to avoid having to spend $800 to outfit each person with a set of safety gear, in addition to losing an hour or 2 of our morning for the safety training, we just went ahead and set that up outside of the fence. We'll see if we get a spot outside the fence this year or not. But yeah, we just have a portable system, put it all on flatbed trailer, haul it all over there, set it up the day before, and then that morning we run the sheep to the handling system if we need it.
For us, we've been lambing on solar sites for the past 4 years. You have to have the right set of ewes to be able to do it. I can tell you that right now. You're not gonna be able to just lamb out anything. We run mainly Katahdin crosses. They seem to have really good lambing success where there's not a lot of intervention that needs to happen. I don't know if I'd ever recommend having lambing frame suffix on site. Probably not the best idea on that. But with the Katahdins, they seem to lamb really, really well. We just make it on larger sites. We just cross fence. So we can have a smaller group on site in a smaller area where we only move them or walk them about once a week, instead of having to move with semi-pots every 2 weeks. So we just kind of move them around the sites a little smaller and a little slower. A lot of the sites in Minnesota are planted in a native species, so we cannot occupy one portion of the site for longer than 3 weeks without affecting the plant diversity of the site. So we need to be careful with that. But we've lambed everything from first-time lambers to our brood ewes on site with little to no intervention. We do always recommend, if you're going to do that, to run livestock guard dogs with them. Most of the solar companies, as long as the guard dogs are not going to cause problems with techs that are going to be in and out of the site, are more than willing to work with you on guard animals. We've used guard dogs and guard donkeys on the sites, miniature donkeys. Both have been successful on sites with different companies. As far as our corral system, we have custom made metal gates that is basically a portable corral system. I will comment on one thing that Evan said. Yes, it is expensive to outfit your entire crew with FR gear and hard hats, and it's not fun to work with all day. I have had a few collaborators that have put their corral system outside of the site, and they have jumped over the corral system, and then they're just out. So that is one thing I will. I've seen some horror stories, and then you're an hour and a half away from home and can't catch these sheep. So that's one thing I would watch out for a little bit, because I understand how uncomfortable it is to work 8 hours a day trimming hooves or something, and you're in full-blown FR gear, and it is not fun and it's not cheap. But yeah, we just use a portable corral panel system. We have border collies that all of the sheep are kind of trained to see the corral system and see the border collies and know where they're supposed to go. So that's how we've always done that.
I hope nobody tells my solar company that I don't have to wear all that gear. I wear a hard hat, and that's because I don't want to hit my own head on the site and have to get my head stitched up, because I have better things to do. But I'm not required to wear anything else. I can go out in my t-shirt and shorts. They do want closed-toe shoes on, which I would wear anyway. But no, I just put on my sunscreen and get my jobs done. I do not lamb on site. I do not like the May weather that comes in Wisconsin. I know you guys aren't really that much different area than I am, but I purposely had all my lambs born before they go out to the solar site and wanted just a little bit of fat on them to move them out even the beginning of May if we needed to. I have a purebred registered flock. Yes, maybe something to do with my lambing too. And I do National Sheep Improvement Program, and I do weigh every lamb that is born and want to know head counts on animals and do take lots of data on lambing ease and all that kind of stuff. So I do lamb before we go to the solar sites.
So while we're on the subject, is there anything besides the gear you have to wear that to keep in mind, particularly about safety or other requirements that the companies have you follow?
Yeah, you'll have depending on the O&M company that gets staffed to your site and the developer, there will probably be a couple different safety gear requirement lists that are provided to you. The combination between the developer and the O&M company is what gives us the FR gear plus the high vis plus the hard hats, safety glasses. In addition to that, you will probably be expected to have some type of OSHA training. Probably going to be expected to have some portion of your staff with CPR, first aid, training, and then probably going to have some type of fire mitigation equipment, fire extinguishers to whatever size and specs on whatever pieces of equipment, whether that be on each mower or if that is with each team of people or in every single vehicle on site or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I'll just say it kind of depends on the size of the solar company and the solar sites. We have sites anywhere from 5 acres to 3,000 acres. And the 5-acre sites don't have many safety requirements for people in and out of the site. They always recommend long pants and safety toe boots, hard hats. But then our company safety requirements are higher than that. So we always have high vis, things like that. And then the 3,000 acre sites are the ones that are going to require your FR gear with the steel toe boots. And so you can have it anywhere in between. Like Evan said, it really depends on the O&M and the developer and the solar company you're working with. There's times when you have to have logs of everyone that goes in and out of the sites with you, and they require those logs to be sent to the company once a month. Yes, and there's safety trainings, OSHA trainings, there's yeah, like Evan said, there's a lot of different things that you're required to do. So yeah, it just kind of depends on the company and the size of the company.
I just have to check in and out every time I go in, which is kind of annoying that I have to check in to go into my field farm. But I do have to call and check in and out every time. So I'm pretty good friends with the operations and management crew because I do go and check on my sheep twice a day because they are just pretty much kind of behind my house and on my farm. So I just go and check on them, make sure everybody's doing good. But I do rotate them every day. Sometimes it's not every other day.
So along with that, could one of you sort of discuss the difference between the solar developer and the O&M company, and then what the communication between those two or one of those entities looks like daily, and maybe what it looked like in the beginning when you were starting up?
We dealt with the solar developing company to begin with. They contracted somebody else to build the site, so that was a company we dealt with. Once the site was built, there were other groups out there trying to replant things in areas and get good growth and good vegetation coverage, and we're still working on some of that yet. Just had another landscaping company here today, so we deal with a lot of other people on site. And then the project was sold to a different owner, so now somebody else owns the project. I've never physically met any of those people. I've spoken with a few on the phone, don't speak to them often, but I do speak with the O&M company. Like I said, when it's grazing time, I'm on the phone with them numerous times a day, just checking in and out. But they're the people I deal with mostly right now is operations and management. But the company that developed our solar site, they actually have the main vegetation maintenance contract, and they subcontract me out to graze. So I do deal with the original solar developers because they hold the vegetation maintenance contract directly from the owners.
Yeah, with M&L, it depends on what who's subcontracting us out, because we are a full VM company. So we usually hold the entire VM contract. And so we usually have bi-weekly meetings, but that's internally. Our subcontractor grazers don't really have any contact with the with the solar companies themselves, but they do have to check in and out with O&M every time they're on the site.
Yeah, same thing. Same thing on our end. We check in and out with O&M daily. Every 2 weeks, we check in with the developer. Our contract is held through the developer for vegetation management. So we are working side by side with O&M, not under O&M. As I understand it, there are a few contracts out there. We have some friends that are contracted to the O&M company for vegetation management. So I think that they're all handled a little bit differently. We're very, very fortunate, though. The developer that we graze for has been absolutely awesome on it. Yeah, and every two weeks we hop on a Zoom call with them.
All right, then last question before I have Travis jump in and corral all the questions from the chat. What do you consider, each of you, when you're looking at vegetation for your sheep at a solar site, and knowing that many times you don't have control over that?
So yeah, M&L's in a kind of a unique situation, because a lot of the times we are the ones that have either created the seed mix or know what goes into the seed mix. And like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the sites in Minnesota had to be seeded in a native seed mix to actually get approval to get built in the first place. So what we're looking at, and that's one of the reasons why we have grazed with hair sheep for so long, but our collaborators kind of have a mix of wool sheep, hair sheep, kind of whatever sheep. You just have to be able to, the sheep will eat them. You might need to push them a little harder at first to get them comfortable with eating the native prairie, but they will eat it. And that's why we also mob graze, so they're not just selecting what they want to eat and just eating that and not eating the site down as a whole. So I think I did mention earlier, we try to get in and out within 2 weeks. So we have a quite a high stocking density. So they're not just picking through what they're going to eat. I know we've had issues with sheep affecting how the prairie is establishing if they're on site for too long.
Yeah, so I guess raise your sheep on weeds for 3 years and then put them onto a solar site, and I don't think you'll have issues, in my experience. But in all seriousness, just as Jody said, lock them in tight, force them a little bit, finesse them maybe, or just hire Travis and give him about 3 days and enough polywire, and he'll figure it out, which has fortunately been my position on it. Ran all the numbers and everything, have spreadsheets upon spreadsheets that tell us all of the numbers as to anticipated forage yields. how many acres they should need, our movement strategy and everything. And I won't quite say that it all goes out the window once we get into a new forage type here at the main farm, or even just a slightly different forage stand on the site. Still, most of the estimates are relatively close, but there's always going to be some adaptability in the grazing strategy as to when things ought to be hit in terms of maturity, and then also what you can actually get for a yield. And then additionally, if you are doing mowing, how much mowing you have to do before or after, if any at all.
I talked a lot about what we had planted out there, and we got to choose what we wanted to plant, but there is a varying difference when you go throughout the site, depending on how much got disrupted during construction, or got compacted a lot. There are areas that are super flush, like some pictures I showed you, and there's some other areas that are kind of pathetic. So.
Great, thanks for answering my questions. Now, Travis will continue with the onslaught of questions for you all.
Thanks, Sabrina, and to our talented group of panelists. And I'll do our best to gather the information from our questions that we have that have been asked from our attendees. And I guess the way I think of this, first off, from a production standpoint, you guys touched on this as well, of what breeds work for you and why. And actually, you've, for the most part, given your justification. I would like to give a little shout out, Evan, to yourself. When you said that the ram lambs that you have had gained what they did in 6 months of age, Evan, you're doing great. Okay, you apologized for it, but those ram lambs and those animals are gaining quite well. And so if that's something that they can continue to gain on, and or you can get paid for it, don't feel apologetic. I thought those were doing really, really good and worked for you. So Evan, I'm just going to give you the shot to discuss kind of how those animals have worked for you.
Well, I'm a pig guy, so I expect them to be 200 pounds on the rail at 6 months old.
Right? Okay, sorry.
Our sheep venture has been rough, but I feel like the last couple of years we've really got through a lot of the problems, got our parasite plan really figured out. Putting them onto very, very high legume pastures at the solar site has helped significantly. I do believe that being a little bit heavier on the parasite control has done us great work. I'm sure that starting with great sheep would be great advice to anybody who has the ability to do so. I don't know how good of sheep that I started with. I know that one flock that I bought did significantly better than the others, and looking back on it, I'm not sure that either of them were great. But we culled hard. We had some natural culls in there. Took a few to the processing plant, sold a few that didn't like, and fortunately ended up doctoring up the rest of them to the point that I'd say they're pretty good sheep now.
Awesome, thank you. I'm going to transition just a little bit to kind of the forages in generalities, and I guess this one more so is targeted to Jody, just in terms of differences of locations. And you kind of said that there was some requirements from what gets kind of put into those solar sites, and I guess my portion as we kind of dig into this is there any way that we get control over that? And maybe also, Brad knows some in terms of just kind of what forages kind of work for it as well. So Brad, you get the follow-up after Jody says, well, this is what you're given, or what can we have control of?
So as a sheep producer, you're not going to be able to have a huge amount of control over what gets planted on these solar sites unless you're in a position like Olivia to build it on your own place. But a lot of these sites, the first sites in Minnesota that went in like 2016 were planted in a pollinator mix. Not thinking about the height of these mature vegetation. We've had some issues. We've also had some issues of the sheep not eating the stemmy things like that. We have one specific solar customer that doesn't have a huge amount of sites in Minnesota. They they had no regulation, I guess. When it came to, a lot of them were planted in the cool season grasses. Those are obviously awesome to graze no matter what time of year you're going to get. A lot of the community solar sites, the smaller ones, aren't going to have a huge amount of requirements when it comes to what they plant on the sites. The largest regulations are going to be your utility scales, your ones that are going to be 500 plus acres, even the 80 plus acres are going to have a huge, are going to have some requirements on what they're going to have to plant in order to get approval. So the larger you get, the more regulations you're going to have. If you're going to have, if your community is going to put up a 5-acre site, you're not going to get a lot of pushback on what you plant on there, and you might have a little bit more control on that.
Thank you, Jody. Brad, what's your guidance? What's your thoughts? What have you learned?
Well, lots of things. I think that a lot of the species grow well. If you're able to plant your own species or have a say in that, I think most of the perennial species that work for lots of grazing situations work well. Meadow fescue, orchard grass, at least up here in the upper Midwest, clovers, red clovers, they all work really well and provide a lot of forage, because you'll probably find out, and maybe some of the people that are grazing, that a lot of the grass, that grows really well underneath the solar panels. You don't have any problems growing ample amount of grass. So if you manage your animals and the grass correctly, it will keep growing back and without any problems. And you'll have a lot of forage throughout the year.
All right, and I'm going to keep this with you, Brad. So some of the questions come to diversification. We're hosting our sheep and goat webinar. All right, and you got the cattle in the background, and so at least from some of the discussions that I've had with some of the previous ones, and as we think about sheep moving through the grazing pasture, their head is down, right? Okay, and the cow sees green grass in front of them, and they love it, right? The goats are different, right? And so the goats like to put their head up, and I know that even Evan, when he talked about some of his of whether the wiring is too low, or if the solar panels, if we don't have enough clearance under them, that potentially that could be a challenge. What are your thoughts just in terms of species, what works for us, and what is the challenges amongst different animals that come through our systems?
Well, if I talk about it, I don't want to take away from the sheep and goat grazing, but for cattle, there's not much issue at all. We don't see any problems with cattle bothering the panels. As long as you're rotational grazing and not having the cattle underneath the panel at a lot of different times. I think the question was the picture of mine in the background. So those cattle are rotated in and out of that system because it's a small solar site. So we don't keep them under there all the time. They're coming back every 3 weeks during the grazing season. So, but on a larger array, you should be able to graze through them and rotate without many issues. There was a question, I think, in the chat about virtual fencing, and I have some cattle right now underneath solar panels on virtual fencing, so I can kind of manage how the cattle move through the solar panels and not have to fence and do a lot of work.
Yeah,
That's
I think virtual fencing is something that we can, even in future discussions, talk about as a topic of interest. It's good when it works, and if it doesn't work or the animals aren't trained to it, right, Brad? Then it takes just a little bit of time too, and so it's not fail safe. And particularly when I think of it, even if I see like solar panels that are near a roadway, I would prefer to have a physical fence around those animals so that we don't have the insurance that we talked about or particular issues. But that's a technology that's continuing to evolve, and we look forward to maybe focusing on that in the future as it can kind of fit for our small ruminants and even obviously cattle as well. But appreciate you guys doing some research. I know at NDSU we're doing some research on the virtual fencing or not having the physical fencing, and so that's something that people can consider in the future. My question to everybody would then be, and it comes for you, and you've got to see some of these questions, is just the pre-planning. So fence height and conversion, and in fact, Evan, if you saw on some of those, what fencing and just a quick clarification. What I understood is that you put enough power through that from a fencing standpoint, Evan, that it'll scare them once and scare them twice, and the learning curve is quicker. Okay, so Evan, I'm going to start with you in terms of the decisions that you need to be made from a physical standpoint of what you need to do or what you need to be equipped with.
Yeah, I'm of the opinion that the solar site is the last place to be sorting out any problems. I think that the additional acreage that it opens up and some of the forage diversity and everything that comes along with it gives huge potential to have significant benefit towards you, particularly in parasite management. Going to clean ground and more acreage, even if it's just to lessen your stock density at home, could have huge beneficial impacts. But the last thing that any of us need to do is to take wormy sheep to a solar site. There's huge potential that if we do, we will ruin it for everybody. There are some photos that circulate in Indiana that occasionally get sent to me of people asking if they're my sheep, of one site that's in the state that has some sheep that look pretty bad that have been seen from the road a couple of times. I think that you need to have very, very solid financials on what you can actually afford to do out there, how that is going to work out. And I am an absolutely huge proponent of, first and foremost, having an incredibly robust understanding of the vegetation growth cycles, approximate yields, what you're able to accomplish for forage utilization prior to showing up on the site. And every single one of those numbers is going to be wrong, but having some sort of understanding and some sort of mental framework to be able to work through that and actually know what you're getting yourself into in terms of potential stocking rates, mowing needs, paddock sizes, everything of that nature definitely needs to be at least a good idea prior to showing up.
Thank you, Evan. Olivia, I have a question if we can kind of move on. And so the inquiries that come from our attendees is maybe more in terms of disruption. And so I can't imagine a better person to answer that, Olivia, than the one that's got it in the backyard. Okay. And so some say, is this a challenge either from traffic or associated challenges, or just kind of the physical cooperation with teammates of the solar? Olivia, the floor is yours on if there's any particular challenges kind of that may or may not be, front of mind when we discuss solar panels.
One question I saw was traffic they were concerned with. We do live on a state highway. I did have to help convince the Department of Transportation to allow them to use our driveway for the solar site because they were very concerned about traffic. The most traffic was during construction, and it wasn't a ton. Now there really isn't often really that much traffic. Maybe once a month they expect somebody to come out and maybe have to check on something. So there's not a lot of extra traffic in and out. What was another question that had to do with this too? Sorry, go ahead. I know I read another one that had to do with stuff like this.
There was one in terms of potential sound changes or noise, if there was anything.
Oh, yes. I cannot hear the inverters from my house. I cannot hear them when I'm on the site unless I'm like maybe 4 or 5 row panels away from them. You can hear them when the sun gets brighter, they rev up their engines like a car, and when the sun goes under a cloud, they rev back down, but they're not that loud. So no, none of my neighbors can hear it at all either. They're way too far away from it. Like I said, I can't even hear it when I'm on most of the site. That was a question we asked when we were in the phase, is this going to make noise? Because we don't need any more noise. We already live on a state highway.
Great, thank you. We've got a couple more questions, and I think we'll pause, move forward with it. One of them is going to be to kind of the ground and the soil impacts, and the second one is going to be towards of how people can get started at not jumping in full level of getting 1,500 sheep like Jody. Okay, so those are the two questions that I'd also additionally like to ask, and as we get a few more that may or may not come in, but what are your thoughts? And again, I'll let our panelists at least have some information, and I'll let Brad touch on it if he so aspires as well, in terms of soil quality. Compaction came up initially. These are decisions that are made from electricity generation of how this can move forward. But do you have any insight in terms of kind of what future and what impacts we may have on the ground that's under it, or what we can do to improve it, first off? So from grazing and soil management.
I'll start here if you want. So just being connected to the soil, this is our farm, and when this solar site gets removed, we want to farm the land again. That was in our contract. That topsoil is on top, so we can farm this land when we're done. We had them add that. I will tell you the way things were engineered. The company that we work with learned a lot. They should not have dug into an extremely steep hill on our farm the way they did, and that has caused a lot of the replanting issues I had mentioned that we're dealing with. But they did not remove all topsoil, but we're not quite sure where some of it went. I'm not saying it's awful everywhere, but it is disheartening as a farmer to see that your topsoil is not where it was. And then especially when we dug our water lines and you got like 18 inches of topsoil, you're wondering, okay, what happened on this side of the fence? The one of the guys that built it had brought it to our attention too. He's like, well, after this is in pasture for 30 acres, this is going to be prime farmland. And that is true. It's not like it's going to be put in row crops, and you're going to have a lot of other things happen to it that aren't always great either. This is going to have the root structure there for 30 some years. So that can be a really, really good thing.
For with M&L, we actually are working with some government agencies and then Temple University on soil and health studies, or soil health and plant community studies. That this is I believe it's a 7-year study through a Temple University and then one other university. And just to show the effects on solar sites, what effects it does on soil, and then also how grazing affects this as well. We are on year 2 of this study, so we haven't had a huge amount of results, but this is not something that they're completely overlooking. And so it is being researched, and it is being looked at. We have seen on sites that are consistently grazed versus consistently not grazed, the difference in plant diversity and plant health. The sites that are consistently grazed have a better plant health, plant diversity, and then also water filtration rates on the soil. So we're not just creating giant puddles on compacted soil. The only times I really see a lot of compacted soil is right after construction and in high traffic areas. That's the only time we've ever really had an issue with soil compaction.
Yeah, I would point out in our area that I guess the soil impacts is going to be largely dependent on your frame of reference. If you are saying that the solar site is negative relative to what otherwise would have been properly managed perennial pastures, I would probably agree. I wouldn't want that amount of construction traffic and grading and everything that they have to do going across my pastures here at the main farm. In our case, however, the solar sites are going in on what is otherwise entirely conventional corn and soybean ground. And I think that it is very, very hard to look anybody in the eye with a straight face when they are arguing that a solar site is worse than full tillage and 4 passes of Roundup a year, as some of the ground around is. And we're very much beneficiaries of that system. We raise pigs. We buy an awful lot of grain, so I can't bash it too hard. Yeah, sheep are absolutely amazing in their ability to get things to grow. We've seen even in just the past 6 months that step-in posts are significantly easier to step into the ground. Definitely huge things happening. As someone who has wintered pigs for many, many years, drop 200 pigs into a spot and leave them all winter. You can see very, very well that sheep are absolutely magical in their ability to get, not just to get something growing, but to get desirable species growing up after very, very significant land disruption and outright destruction. So the perennial pastures in combination with sheep is a huge win, in my opinion, regardless of whether the panels are there or not.
Thanks, Evan. So from a University of Minnesota Extension standpoint, I heard, to paraphrase, that sheep are absolutely magical, and I didn't even have to paraphrase. See, that's a quote from you, all right? So that's a good thing. And Dr. Hines heard it too. Dr. Hines, what's your thoughts in terms of just kind of restorative management and with a soil quality? And then our last question for those panelists will be, how do I get involved?
I think you can improve soil quality with grazing, and if you're grazing underneath the solar panels, I think livestock are the way to do that. Everybody knows I do not like solar panels taking up valuable land, so I think trying to incorporate livestock into solar grazing with sheep or other livestock species is wonderful, and I think it's a way to restore soil health.
Thanks for the shout out and the appraisal there, Dr. Hines. I will pass it to each of our colleagues there and provide, as you saw in some of the questions, and I think that this is the case, is as some people may have smaller operations. We're well aware of that in at least our region and probably across America. Is that sometimes it takes an infrastructure of the amount of animals to do something, or at the very least maybe a more intensive grazing. And so the last question that we will ask for this evening's webinar, and please everybody put your evaluation in the poll and quiz, is to say, how do I get into it at a small level? Okay, we don't all want to go all in all at once. Evan, I'm going to pass it to you first, and our ladies can fight for who's second. So how do we get involved on being part of solar grazing?
Small scale can definitely be difficult. I don't know anything about the community scale solar sites. I have a few different friends who have been on community scale, who have, sheep that are out on 5, 10, 15 acre sites. Our site is 900 acres. It is broke into 9 different permanently fenced arrays. I would be ecstatic at times to have somebody take over one of those small arrays with a smaller flock of sheep that is managed under its own rotation. I don't know that it would be something that can actually work out unless it is absolutely the perfect person that gets along really well with me and gets along really well with Dad and Travis. But definitely something that is an opportunity to partner with someone who has the contract, who may not have all of the sheep to be able to fully stock the site, or wants to put that service out there to allow somebody else the opportunity to get their feet wet to try it out.
Yeah, I'm kind of in a unique situation again, because it is actually my job to find smaller sheep people, sheep producers, and find sites around the US to get them on solar that's appropriate for the size of their sheep, size of their flock, and their location. So even if I don't have a site in your area, if you are interested, I can obviously answer more questions. My contact information was on some of my slides. But yeah, and another really good resource is the ASGA website and the ASGA membership. Like, they have so much information on that, and they have such a wonderful community of solar grazers. And they have solar developers on that website as well. That's the first place I would look. But like I said, I'm always open to talking to people and see if I can hook you into opportunities that would be appropriate for your operation.
I always wanted to be at like 25 breeding ewes per year. But to graze a 30-acre site, our grazing plan said we need about 68. So that's about tripling my flock. So going from 25 to 75. I didn't want to be that big because I do more of a intensive management, and just because I do a purebred flock, and I have other goals too that I'm working for. And it's just me. I don't have other employees. My husband and I do own the farm, but he has his own things with crops and raising dairy heifers and another full-time job also. So having more sheep than that is too much for me to handle. So I guess I would say I am smaller, but it is a lot for one person. So I bred about 72 ewes this year, lambed them all myself. It was a very long 7 weeks alone.
Thank you, Olivia. So I would like to give a shout out as people are kindly joined us for this evening's University of Minnesota and North Dakota State University extension webinar through part of our sheep and goat team. We have on June 27th at 10 a.m. is an in-person agrivoltaics field day at Morris, Minnesota. And so we hope that people are, if they're interested, can come to Morris, Minnesota. And in fact, Sabrina has helped to put together a webinar series. And so this is just one of ours, July 22 at 7 p.m. Feel free to look for that. That's growing forage and grain crops under solar panels. And appreciate, again, Sabrina for taking the lead of a topic that's very interesting and very upfront in terms of what's happening in our agricultural industry with the agrivoltaics. So we had a great panel. Appreciate our talented panelists with Evan and Olivia and Jody sharing their stories, and Dr. Hines' talented knowledge to add some that they've worked with. And again, that he'll show information of what they do in Morris, Minnesota. And so we'd like to thank you for joining us for our extension sheep and goat webinars that we try to host nearly every month. And so hope everyone has a good evening. And don't forget, we are driven to discover. And then this time, it's for sheep solar grazing. So thanks for joining us. Have a good evening.